All right, let's finish up chapter 20 here. And as we continue on with the notes, we're now going to take a look at room acoustics. 90% of the quality of your voiceover recordings is directly related to the acoustics of your recording environment. Now, the percentage there, quite honestly, it's made up. The point here being that the vast majority of the criteria for whether or not you're going to have a good sounding recording is making sure that your room is set up in such a way that you're going to be able to get a nice, crisp, clean, clear sound as you're doing your vocal performance. Now, what a professional studio does not sound like. It doesn't sound like the rooms in your house. Okay? Think about it. As you walk into a house, especially if you walk into a house that doesn't have a whole lot of furniture into it, you can talk and you pretty much hear your sound reverberating through the walls, and you hear yourself echoing throughout the room and maybe even into the adjoining room. See, in most homes, its rooms have the same inherent acoustic problems, which fall into two basic categories. There's reflections of sound waves off of hard surfaces. That is commonly referred to as room reverberation. That's that echo effect that you would hear. There's also the possibility of the transmission of external sounds through walls, the floor, the ceiling, even through windows. So those are sort of things that, let's face it, if you're in a home, the home is not built in such a way that people really worry for the most part about noise cancellation and sound isolation. That's just not a economically feasible thing for most homeowners to do. So in a lot of cases, you're going to have these sort of situations that you're going to have to deal with. So in order to optimize the acoustical environment, you have to be able to address those two issues. Room reverberation, the common echo resulting from sound waves bouncing off hard parallel surfaces like walls, windows, and furniture. Probably the most prominent room we can think of that has this problem would be most people's bathrooms, because not only are most bathrooms smaller, so sound doesn't have that far to travel when sound is created, so you get a lot more echo and reverb. But many bathrooms also are built with tile, which is a better reflector of sound and creates those sort of echoes in a much more profound sort of way. But there's always a little bit of reverberation in just about any room, because sound does reflect off of hard surfaces. Slap echo, this form of reverb, is what you usually hear when you clap your hands in an empty, uncarpeted room. So kind of that, momentary delay of the instance of a sound. That's what we're talking about with slap echo. As far as fixing acoustic issues in the room that you're recording in, a couple of ways to take care of it. First, you could soundproof the room. That's a relatively expensive sort of thing to do. Actually doing all sorts of things to your walls, your floor, your ceiling, for sound to be deadened and make it so that outside sounds do not come in. The second option, little more affordable. What most people tend to do will not be to soundproof the room completely, but to do a sound treatment. Basically try to acoustically dampen the room so that you are creating as minimal of a room reverb as you can, and you're doing as best as possible to prevent outside sounds from coming in and overtaking portions of your recording. Acoustically treating the walls of a room will effectively kill internal reverb for a dead sound and can help reduce external noise. So there are some practical ways to treat a room. When you do it, you want to create an acoustically non-reflective environment, one in which your voice can be recorded without any reflections from objects or walls, so that the microphone is only picking up your voice as created by you. Now, let's talk about some of the things to consider when you are sound treating a room. First off, there's acoustic foam. Acoustic foam will both absorb sound and it will diffuse the reflection of sound waves. Foam products dampen a room, but they may not provide much in the way of acoustic isolation. So what we're talking about here is there's many different types of foam. Most of what people tend to think of is kind of the stuff that you stick on walls that looks like they hold, a case of eggs or something like that. And they are effective at preventing sound from bouncing back. But they may not necessarily provide full protection as far as sounds coming from spaces where that foam does not reside. So if you've got a section where you don't have that treatment of the foam, even with that, sometimes outside sounds can get in, but it is going to reduce your sound from coming back to you. Windows are often the biggest acoustic problem in a home. Sound transmission only begins to be seriously reduced with windows when you have triple pane windows, especially when there's at least one pane of a different thickness. It might be necessary to seal your windows by installing dampening materials over the window opening. So you think about if you go into a radio studio or a professional recording studio and there's a window where you can look into the studio. Have you ever noticed that the panes for that window, there's generally two panes and they either convex or concave into each other. They're not set up in parallel. Most of the ones that I see have a wider opening between the two window panes at the top and then a more skinnier gap in the bottom of the window. And the reason that happens, the reason why they build that way, is that it does better at reflecting sound away and deadening the sound that is in the studio itself. Whereas if you have parallel panes, like you do in most normal window environments, the sound can more easily bounce back. But if you have a triple pane window, it does a much better job at preventing that sound from bouncing back and from outside sounds getting through. A wall built for acoustic isolation will usually be framed as a double wall, consisting of an exterior wall and a completely separate inside wall. One of the materials that is used to help deaden sound is a mass-loaded vinyl. It's a dense vinyl material, and it has barium salts within it. It gives basically it has properties of reducing acoustic transmission when placed over the inside of an existing wall. So this would actually involve getting your tools out and going into the wall, putting this mass-loaded vinyl inside your wall in order to be able to deaden the sound. So in this case, you're getting more into that soundproofing sort of aspect. It is something that is a pretty decent investment. It wouldn't be an option for people that are renting their home or otherwise do not have full control of the dwelling that they're in. Some other things to keep in mind as far as the room that you're setting up is corners and floors and ceilings. Corners where walls meet, whether it's at the ceiling or at the floor, they are notorious for reflecting low-frequency sound waves, often resulting in a boominess that can seriously affect your recordings. So you may not necessarily want to set up your recording area in the corner of the room, especially if you have a microphone that is sensitive to picking up more than just your voice. Floors and ceilings, they can also be reflective surfaces, much in the same sort of way that we talked about with windows. It's generally not a great idea to have a recording studio in a place where you have a wooden floor, as an example. You may want some sort of carpeting or something to help deaden sound. As beautiful as hardwood floors can be, they may not necessarily be great for setting up your recording room in. Some alternatives to treating an entire room. You can create an acoustically dead area surrounding the area of your microphone. You can use things like blankets, pillows, wall hangings, even overstuffed furniture. Anything that you can put into the room that will absorb sound as opposed to reflecting it is going to help you. You can purchase a prefab isolation booth. This would be an actual physical box that you would walk into, that you would have your microphone set up in. Many times these rooms will also be able to house a computer and some equipment and things like that, so that you can produce as you're in that booth doing your session. Those can be kind of pricey. They start around $5,000. So it's a pretty hefty investment. Little cheaper, you can use a portable voiceover booth. And what these are basically boxes in which there is foam in a box, and you put your microphone into that box, and you're able to speak into that box, and it helps to prevent a lot of the outside noise from coming in. Now, there's pros and cons to that. Those tend to be a lot more affordable. They're portable in many ways. If you're on the go and you're recording in different places, you travel a lot. But you're also sticking your head into a box, which means you may not be able to read copy as effectively, or you may not be able to produce your own content as well. You'd have to be really, really familiar with the settings and everything of your equipment and all of that. Basically, you want to strive for the best room acoustics you can, while also staying within your budget. Don't think that if you're going to build a home studio, you have to automatically shell out thousands of dollars to make this happen. Start small, get the right microphone, maybe do some minor acoustic treatments to make sure that sound is deadened right in the area around the microphone so it just picks up your voice. And start small. And as you get more work, you can increase the different tools that you have to be able to make yourself and the space that you're working in more versatile. Now, let's talk about your computer. One thing you're going to want to do is devise a folder system that's easy to work with. Now, there's different ways that people kind of set up their file folders and systems and things like that. The author suggests having a primary folder for each client and then subfolders for each project. I tend to like doing that. So in that way, say you're doing commercials for Chevrolet. And so you'll have a Chevrolet folder. And then you'll have a separate folder within the Chevrolet folder for the Corvette. And all the projects that you work on in the Corvette will be in that folder. You'll have a separate folder for Chevy pickup trucks, and on and on and on. You may also want to include an upload or deliver folder. Once you've rendered your MP3s or other deliverable files, you put it in that separate folder. It'll make it easier to locate them when burning to a CD ROM or attaching to an email or uploading the file to FTP or the cloud or wherever else you're sending those files to. Basically, it's a folder of your finished products. Also, if you're using this sort of system where you're using a cloud storage folder and you're allowing your clients access to that, it makes it nice and easy for them to be able to get the finished products that way as well. Next tip, and this is an important one, use a separate external hard drive for your voiceover projects. You want to keep your files separate from your operating system. If for some reason your operating system were to crash, then you don't lose all your work that way. It also reduces stress on your operating system's drive so that hopefully you don't have to deal with a operation system crash. And it also allows for portability of files from PC to PC. If you work at home some days, if you work in another recording studio other days, that sort of thing. Not to mention that it's a great idea to have backups of all your work. So use an external hard drive, use a USB thumb drive, use cloud storage. Have at least one extra copy of all your stuff somewhere so that if one system fails, you have the other system as a backup. Use remote access or internet cloud storage to access files if you need to access your projects and files from multiple computers or locations. Again, not to mention, it provides an extra measure of ways to access your stuff and to have backups of things. Master your computer software. You must be able to handle any computerized business functions quickly and efficiently. Whether you're using Windows, Mac, or Linux, know the operating system, how to find files, how to search for files, know the software that you're using, know what it can do, know its limitations, know the structure of how it saves things and how it expects to find things. All of that is very important. And then know in advance how to deliver files to your clients. Do they have an FTP that they want you to upload to? How do you use FTP client software? Learn that. Know how to burn to a CD ROM if they want physical media. How to send things through email. How to send through third-party delivery uploads. Things like You Send It, where basically you have a website where you would upload a file and then it sends it off as an email. Whatever it is that is being expected to use as a file delivery system, make sure you understand how it works. Now, when you're working with clients remotely, it's becoming more and more of a thing where you may not be going to another studio somewhere, that people would expect that you have some sort of recording capability at home. However, there are producers that even in that environment still want to have sort of that working together in the moment sort of feel. So there's ways to be able to do that through video and phone patches. A video or phone patch will allow a producer to directly supervise you from a remote location. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that in doing this, whether you're using a telephone, whether you're using some sort of internet connection like a Skype or a FaceTime, the audio quality is not going to be good enough for recording over the internet, but it is more than adequate for monitoring. So it provides the ability for people to listen in and pretty much get a feel for what's going on. But you don't want to rely on the internet to have you send your voice, send it through the internet, and have them record on their end. Now, there is some rather high quality equipment that would allow you to do that, but most voice artists aren't going to have access to that sort of thing. And that's something that In order to use that sort of equipment, both the sender and the receiver would need to have compatible equipment to make that work. You will need to be able to monitor the incoming call without your client's audio being recorded. It's important that you isolate the track recording, your microphone, from any incoming audio from your client. So you want to make sure that you have the ability to be able to record without capturing audio from your client. You also want to make sure that you have the ability to talk to your client through that protocol without affecting your recording as well. Now, most cases that's going to require some sort of external setup from just your mic into a computer. You're going to need to be able to have different sends for the audio through your microphone that you can send to your computer, that you can send to the person on the other line. And there's ways around that, and it's kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing in this chapter, but know that it is a possibility to be able to do if that's something that you're interested in being able to have a client work with you as you are doing your recording. So just bear in mind that you're going to need to have that ability to isolate your conversation with the client and the things that you're recording while having the ability to be able to freely go back and forth and perhaps do both at the same time. So that's going to do it for this chapter. We're going to do this chapter in conjunction with chapter 21, talking a little bit more about the things to consider when you are recording from home. And you'll want to pay attention to those things, especially if you do want to produce the content that you create and create from home. So as far as this chapter goes, finished up the notes and study questions, get them turned in, and then we'll hop over to chapter 21.